Hey there. First, a quick note this week to start thinking about term project topic ideas. So check out that term project assignment guide that's posted in the course overview module to get a refresher on what the expectations are and to see some examples of projects that students have done in the past. If I can help, please just let me know. It might be a good idea to do some scanning ahead in the Lornell book to scout for topics that interest you. You'll be posting your ideas to the related discussion board next week. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about Shapenote Singing and even walk you through some of the basics of how it works. Lornell, of course, teaches us that Shapenote Singing was the first recognized form of white religious folk music, which is a significant distinction. And part of why I think people have found it so compelling and why there is such renewed interest in it today is in part because of the format. So the way the music is printed is a mashup of standard Western notation with the staff and clef and key signatures and units of measure like quarter notes and half notes, plus an invented system of shapes that simplify the way you get the information you need in order to sing a note. For example, you don't have to know anything about what the lines on a staff mean or what the symbols like sharps and flats mean. You start by learning 4 or 7 shapes, depending on which branch of the tradition that you're working with. And while there are a handful of variations of shapes with the many editions of books that have been published, I'm most familiar with the 7-shape system, which was introduced in the mid-19th century. Here's an example of the shapes from a 7-shape system called the Aiken System. So you'll see there are 7 different shapes that take you up the scale. So if we were to start at the bottom there, the shape that in this system looks like a triangle. In other systems, by the way, the top of the triangle is hacked off, but otherwise it's pretty comparable. So that first note would be our do, and that could start wherever. It doesn't matter where that pitch is actually printed on the staff. When you sing in Shapenote Singing, you pick what's called a do of convenience or a key of convenience, right? So you pick a key that works for all of the voices who are singing. So in this case, I'll just, for example, start my do right here. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Now, some of you might have heard these sounds before. Perhaps you know them as solfege, or maybe you remember that scene from The Sound of Music where they sing the do, a deer, a female deer, where they sing that song. It's the same sounds, and each note of the scale gets its own sound. The idea here is that you learn to associate the shape with the sound, so that every time you see that diamond, you noticing me, and every time you see that circular shape, you're noticing so. And over time, if you know where one note is, you know how to find the rest of them. Just by practicing that, you start to build a musical framework that helps you consciously or subconsciously learn about intervals and jumpstarts your ability to sing in harmony in groups. Historically, here in Central Appalachia, those that led Shapenote Singing schools would come visit a community for a few weeks in the fall. Why in the fall, you may ask? Because that's when people would have time to think about things like music, after the crops were harvested and the workload was shifting. In my opinion, one of the coolest things about Shapenote Singing is that it is all about creating community musical experiences. And it's a participatory music rather than a performative music. It's just designed to get everybody singing together. You sing in what's called a hollow square with 4 groups of people sitting facing each other, grouped by which part they're singing. So you'll have a bass section, the tenor or the lead, alto, and treble. And in my experience, modern Shapenote Singing communities love welcoming those that are new to the tradition. Most of the time, you're just along for the ride amidst a group of people who know the music well and sing it with gusto. But you'd be surprised how much our voice is able to follow those around us without us knowing exactly what we're doing. You'll hear some examples of Shapenote Singing in the listening folder this week. It is funky stuff. I also want to mention that ETSU actually has its very own Shapenote Singing course. So keep an eye out for that when it is offered, and know that you don't have to have any particular musical background to take the class. We just get together and sing a lot and learn more about the tradition. Let me know if you're interested, or if you want to know more about that. I also have a handful of Shapenote Singing books on hand. If you want to see what they're like, here's a few of them. Again, there's a bunch of different editions, but you should, come check them out. I'll have them in my office, and you can come borrow a physical copy, or I can scan you some pages if you're curious, but you're not on campus. I'd also love to know if any of you or your friends and family members have participated in Shapenote Singing. Be sure to let us know, perhaps in this week's discussion board. All right, that's all I got for you today. Have a great week.